Here he is, a friend, mentor, coach, the dean of Vancouver sports reporters and TSN's West Coast bureau chief for nearly 3 decades.
He doesn't throw that around lightly.
He does have scheduled hits for Friday's big deadline show on the network, and he joins us now from Rogers Arena, the one and only Farhan Lalji.
Thank you, gentlemen. I feel like there needs to be an applause track in the background after that intro. And speaking of the Historic Wall Center, because of early start times with Trade Center, I will be staying at the Historic Wall Center the night before on Thursday nights. Do the Sport BC Athlete of the Year Awards, head over to the Wall Center.
Excellent.
There you go.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to having you here at the Wall. First and foremost, before we get into some of the particulars, but after what Alvin said yesterday to IMAC, not taking a step back, not interested in rentals, are you prepared for the deadline about nothing, Farhan? Are you prepared for a Seinfeldian day on Friday?
Well, look, with this team, I think there's so many competing agendas, right, in terms of what they want to get done. Yes, I think there's an understanding of where they're at this year, but at the same time, the rebuild thing's never going to happen. So everything they do maybe casts an eye to next year. So, they're not looking for rentals. That much is clear, which is a positive, right? Like the last thing you want to do is see them add somebody with no term left. They want term, and they don't just want term. They want term of a certain vintage, right? So, a Braden Shen type of acquisition in their early 30s isn't going to happen for this team. They want someone in their mid to late 20s if they are going to acquire. So, and I also think, I heard you guys the other day talking about it, that I just don't think this group has it in them to let the deadline pass without doing anything. So you could get to 11:59 and they just do something minor of players we've never heard of just for the sake of doing something minor. So, whether they sell, they're not going to fire sale, right? Like I do think that, would they move Brock Boeser? Yeah, but I think that deal is going to have to start with a first-round draft pick. They're not just going to move him for the sake of moving him. So there's all of those different agendas that are going to have an effect on what Vancouver does on Friday.
Yeah, the only big thing is left is Boeser. I know that your network's got something on Pettersson's possibility right now, but I don't think any of us on the ground here feel like that's anything close. It's probably Boeser, and that would mean this is his last game tonight versus the Ducks, which seems kind of crazy to think about.
It does, and we talked to him about that specifically. You might have that moment tonight where the fans recognize what could happen, and they may, if there's an ISO shot on the Jumbotron, there might be an impromptu standing ovation. And how would he react to something like that? I mean, this is a fan base that has certainly engaged in game with its players, right? Whether it's Let's Go Petey or whether it's JT Miller or whatever it happens to be. So I wouldn't be surprised if the fans did something. And Brock's a feeler, right? Like he is that guy, right? That these moments hit him. And that's why, one of the reasons why I think he's struggling right now, because he knows this is out there. And I think it is impacting him. So it really is cool how the fan base has responded to this guy, because he represents, when I think of this organization and what it needs to uphold, I think of the Twins. And I believe that Brock Boeser upholds those values. And I think that's why he resonates with the fan base the way others don't.
Well, and also because, he came here as a young man. Gillis used to always say, we bring them here at 20 years old and expect them to figure it all out. No, he came here as a young man. He grew up before his eyes. There was clearly a yearning for home with what his father was going through. And I felt like our community sort of lifted him up and became that support network for him during some pretty difficult times for the Boeser family.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a time when a couple of years ago, his agent was given permission to talk to other teams. And, I talked about it, as a move, and, fans would come at you and say, well, what are you talking about? You're trying to run him out of town. No, we're not. We just feel such a level of empathy for this guy that if he feels he needs a change, okay. We kind of all took a different approach, a big picture approach to beyond hockey and what was important for this guy. And I just think that we all have kind of grown to care about him. And the community's like that. And I think coming out of it, when he said, I think the best thing that ever happened to me was I didn't get traded, right? That spoke volumes for his relationship with this community.
Yeah. Are you on the probability side above 50% now? Or are you?
Yeah, I think so.
You think he's going to get traded?
I do, and I say that because I do think someone's going to come in with a compelling offer. And I think one of the things the Canucks want to do here, because they're not afraid to negotiate after the deadline. And I think there's kind of a hope that maybe the deadline and the interest in the player around the deadline will kind of give us an indication of the market, right? So that if maybe there isn't a ton of interest at the deadline, it sort of shows us that maybe we're right in our assessment. And if there is a lot of interest, it shows us maybe we're wrong and we need to change our approach. But if there is a ton of interest, someone's going to find that first-round draft pick and a player. Like, I think that trade is going to be out there for him when we've seen what's happened to this point, that there's going to be a team that believes we can bring him here, get him past the deadline, get him with a good center, and we're going to get the best out of a guy that's proven to be a 30-goal over 82-game player. So I do think that trade's going to be out there, and I think the Canucks eventually will probably pull the trigger.
And a playoff performer, too, when you take a look at what he did last year and in the bubble run. Pius Suter, what do you think is the end game there, and what happened there with Dallas, best you can tell?
Yeah, look, I think there were some conversations, but, ultimately they couldn't get it across the finish line. Might it happen? It could. This is a valuable player. I mean, he's a player that could very well score 20 goals this season, and he does so many little things right. Tocchet was asked about the fact the Canucks penalty kill this year is ranked 6th in the league, and, the impact that players like Pius Suter and Teddy Bluger have as a first forward pair, going over the bench when those things happen. And he's a guy that does, we joke about little things as it related to Louis Eriksson, but I think there's a lot of little things and medium things and sometimes big things that Pius Suter does. So is there a team out there willing to part with a second-round pick for a guy that really, really is a useful player? We'll see. And if that's out there, I think they potentially make the move. But to extend what I said about Boeser, I just don't think they're going to fire sale on this guy. But it also doesn't sound like there's going to be any kind of an extension forthcoming between now and Friday.
You have been a critic as much about Elias's attitude as about his game. For that reason, I'm most interested on your take on what we heard from him Tuesday.
That was nice, but this is going to come again. Do you know what I mean? Like, this isn't the first moment of where he's said something that he really shouldn't have said and sort of took a less than appropriate level of accountability. And then he's kind of felt the need, whether it's through PR advice or what have you, to walk it back because you didn't come across looking good in that situation. And then a stressful moment comes again, and then we see what he's all about. So I'm curious not only to see what happens now, but what happens at the end of the year at that availability and what comes of it, right? So at the end of the day, Petey, just play, right? Just play. It's all nice and well and good to say some of these things, but at the end of the day, play. And I'm not willing to accept that this is 13 months of tendonitis. I'm just not. So at some point, he's got to get past that and play because, talk is nice. And with this player, the talk goes up and down. It comes back and forth. So let's see what he actually does in terms of on-ice process and performance.
It's speaking.
Boy, you're tough, Coach.
Yeah, he is tough.
Boy,
Proof in the pudding, though. I get it.
It almost sounds
right?
like he's a problem child at the New West Hayaks.
Speaking of injuries,
I think this guy has the ability to be a coach killer, guys. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel. Right? There's a level of petulance there, and so go out and perform.
Okay, didn't think I'd be here, but let me be his defenseman for a second. Tocchet said he's now seeking out coaches looking for help, going out early. I'm more actions than words, guys, than a words guy. And if Tocchet is talking about him now doing the right things and seeking out the help that has always been there, and he's been so hesitant to avail himself of, do you not see that as a potential for a turning point?
Sure, yeah, because the problem with what Petey's given us to this point, it's not his words, right? People think that, you're a media guy, you're upset. It's not about that. It's about his process, and it's about his professionalism as it relates to that process. So if your process is going to change and you're going to, the Sedins have always been there, right? And we've always assumed that they've had a connection because they're Swedish, and they haven't, right? They've always been there. So it's unfortunate it took this long, but yeah, I think what has happened is there's been a bit of humbling here, and I think that humbling was required. So if the humbling changes the process, which eventually gives us a different level of production, great, right? It would be a real shame if he never found his game again. No one's advocating or cheering for that. No one wants to, be right or wrong. It would be better for everybody involved if he could wind it back and find his game again. I think we all want to see that. And it starts with better process, both now and this off season and coming into camp, with a different fitness level. All of those things are going to lead to it, but it's going to start with some humbling, which I think may have happened.
Whether that means that he finishes his contract with the Canucks or elsewhere, you're right. Everybody, the tide will raise all ships. Speaking of injuries, Quinn Hughes has got, I don't know, 3 of them at least right now.
Yeah.
Which means the Hart Trophy is over. Maybe the Norris, probably the Norris as well. And they don't have a services tonight. Should they just, if they think that they can, and Rick Tocchet says not 100% to get him back 100%, but if you can get him up to 95% by resting him for another week or so, should they do that, or do they need him to make the difference because he's the generator of everything for the Canucks?
I would shut Quinn Hughes down, full stop. Like, truly. Now, will they do that? I think they could get to that point. But yeah, I think they should wait a week. And I think Quinn is his own worst enemy because he wants to play. Tocchet admitted this was a compensatory thing, right? That the previous injury has contributed, and his attempt to get back has contributed to this injury, because you compensate in your movements and things like that, and other things get left vulnerable. And Tocchet did, cop to the fact that, yeah, there is concern about, handling this right so that this isn't a long-term thing. So you handle this guy with kid gloves. I wouldn't want him at 95. I would want him at 105. And Tocchet said that wouldn't happen this year, right? Like, he's not going to be 100% at any point. So I don't know how you don't risk further injury. So for me, I'd take a big picture approach, and this season is an easy one to punt on.
Are you done with him on All Matters Canucks?
I am.
Okay, so we're fresh out of time here, and I do say that because I know you could spend 30 good minutes on what I'm about to introduce, but if I were to summate your feelings on the activity down the I-5 with the Seahawks wide receivers room today, DK Metcalf, his attitude, you mad, bro. Tyler Lockett, he gone. You sad, bro. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. Look, I wish there was a number, a lower number than the $17 million cap hit that they could have kept Lockett there, because he'd be a great wide receiver 3, and he's so good for that room and the culture of that team. And for Metcalf, physical freak who just doesn't take over games. He doesn't live up to the body. And the fact that this guy could potentially get $30 million is not a good thing. I think it's a blessing in disguise for the Seahawks.
Yeah, right. We'll get to more of that as the show goes on. Thank you for this. Enjoy your stay at the historic Wall. Come say hi to the studio, and we'll catch up with you down the road, my friend.
Let's do it.